Times 5:46, I call this Finance Advisory Committee meeting to order. Town of Aurora acknowledges that the initial lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas and Virginia Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of its territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands and its municipality. We join them in these responsibilities. Further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands and the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized Treaty Number 13 as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Motion to approve the agenda. Mike, all those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Any declarations of your interest? Seeing none. We have a motion to receive the minutes of April 15th, 2025. Michael, second, Harold. Comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Delegations, matters for consideration. One, this is a memo regarding line-by-line review of planning and development services.
So we have Marco and team here to answer any questions. Just so you know, we did have to consolidate a few items because we did a little bit of moving some dollars around between different areas. So we kind of brought them together to get a more comparable picture. But this gives you an overview of the line by line and any of the significant variances to have some explanations and stuff. So if you have any questions, Marco and team are here.
Questions? Right, we'll start. So just a general question. I'll throw you to Marco. Marco, with respect to the workload, are things getting done? Are things falling through the cracks? Are we managing okay?
We have 3 years to
Sure.
yeah. I've got a pretty lean team, but yeah, we're on top of all aspects. I mean, planning, development services, planning application wise. Morris has got a good team, and processing. We've got enough planners to handle our current workload and anticipated workload. Even we're expecting more applications even in the rest of this year and in 2026.
And and not just in your department. I've heard this in other departments elsewhere as well. That everybody is managing the workload well. That things are getting done. Things aren't falling through the cracks. But at the same time, when we see the line-by-line budget, I often see that there are wage savings. A lot of departments have vacancies, but yet we're still getting everything done. It's a little bit more noticeable in yours because in the first line it's showing that when we look at the forecast, the actuals, I mean, it's $850,000. Throw in OMERS and everything else. I mean, essentially $1 million in we'll call it savings, so to speak, because of all the vacancies. And I guess, and it's not just to isolate your department, but in general, all departments, if all the work's getting done, if we're not seeing things fall through the cracks, if we're managing the workload, but yet we have a lot of vacancies throughout the organizations, perhaps part of our budget process should be to look at whether we should keep those positions on the books or take them off. Because I mean, if you have $1 million in savings in wages, and let's just say that the average wage is $125,000 for an average salary, then that's 8 people. Right? Do we actually need to have 8 full-time vacancies, so to speak? Maybe it's 6, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 4. But I think that there should be, as part of this ongoing budget process, a review of all of our vacant positions to say, do we really need people on the books? And I understand staff's concern that it might be, well, it's so hard to get them on the books, go through this process. If I take them off, I might not get it back. But at the same time, if it's true that we're managing, we're getting all the work done, things aren't falling through the cracks, and maybe we don't need these people in these positions. So I think that's my only real comment, is that I think we should take a hard look at, in all departments, to be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, the full-time salaries, and if there are a significant number of vacancies and we've managed for so long without them, then maybe that's an indication that we're doing a better job today. We're more efficient, just like you said, Marco, that you're lean and you're managing, but it's something I think we should have to be processed.
I think certainly I can speak to some of that. I mean, it's something that we'll look at obviously moving forward, but with respect to vacancies, I mean, we've got one in the building that has been vacant for a while, the building inspector, and basically had that for a while because we just want to see how things are going with respect to sort of transition of staff and expertise in staff. With respect to development and planning, we've had one vacancy planner for almost a year, but essentially been backfilling that with the co-ops there. And that's going to be filled this coming fall. It's going to be an internal sort of hire staff. In engineering, to be honest, I don't think we may have had vacancies, but that's only been because of people that so apart from the one vacancy, maybe it's something that we'll look at before, whether it's appropriate to do that staff population all together and need to be done. Indicators for the hire, planning and policy are pretty lean, and they don't have no vacancy, but we're gonna please come back for that when they go understand.
Thank you, through you guys. So when I look at the variance, 850,000, right? Like for that value to be generated by 2 and 3 months capping from positions, people leaving and being filled and stuff, that seems like a lot of movement as well. But again, it's just from looking at it, all of my ask really is just, and not just you, I mean, I think it should be of all department heads, and I'll echo my comments to our CEO and to the mayor, is just that, I think that there's a lot of pressure for a lot of different reasons. And I think as part of our budget review process, we should be looking at all of these vacancies, so-called vacancies, and just making sure that they're absolutely 100% needed.
Understood.
Definitely. I'll just add one thing, if you recall, remember 2014 to 2018, we passed a motion that any vacancies need to be reviewed. And so I agree with you, we are supposed to be doing that. I don't know if it was getting extended to, you guys are doing it as well, but yeah.
I want to go beyond just reviewing it, but I mean, if it's terminated, then take it off the books.
I agree, yeah.
For sure,
No,
right?
for sure.
I mean, it's one thing to say, well, we don't need to hire this person right now, but we'll leave it on the books and maybe we need it in the future. When I'm saying, if we don't need it, then let's take it out and then we'll address it down the road when we get busy and we need it.
Well, I think that was the intent of that original motion, was that if we were supposed to review the vacancy and decide whether that position is any longer needed by the municipality, and it's not, then we basically eliminate that position altogether. And I think that was the idea behind the vacancy.
Yeah, and currently, whenever we're hiring any new permanent full-time positions, there is a vacancy control form that does go to the CA for approval, and that is reviewed before filling the vacancy. There's, I don't know, from the perspective of the needs to look at the current vacancies we have and how long they be vacant. We can look at it from that perspective, because that's a little bit different too.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I'm struggling to figure out, doing all the right things in that respect. How did we get to I guess a savings of $850,000?
So
I mean, that's a lot of positions.
well, it's not actually 850 because you also have to consider this, the sick time, the 44,000 plus the year-end accruals. That factors into that as well. So it's about $100,000 less from that. Still a large amount, but
Sure.
not quite as big.
To be honest, aside from the one vacancy building through Mr. Mayor, partially, a lot of it is just capping vacant positions and capping a few full months of part of it and being filled.
And also when we're filling positions, it could be someone at top of range that's leaving, where someone else is coming in at lower end of the pay scale. And that can create some variability within the departments as well.
To you, and it does, especially in planning, and even a couple of new hires in engineering. There would have been new hires, starting at the low end of the pay grade. No, it's something,
But I mean,
duly noted and.
For sure, I
We got-
mean, I'm not challenging your explanation, but it's just trying to help understand, because even if we said, well, the difference is 50,000 per person, we still get the 750, that's a lot of transitions, right? My ask is still the same, and if we're doing it, great, maybe we just need a fire chief's home, take a look at it.
I'll also talk about the possibility of beefing up how we look at vacancies.
Other than that, I mean, my only other comment really was, you looked at, from the revenue side, I didn't know that, for the most part, a number of them were in yellow because it said the revenues were lower than anticipated, with the exception of, PBS planning, engineering, site plan fees, engineering fees for the subdivision was higher than anticipated. So I'm sure it's just, you're gonna say it's just a timing issue, but it's interesting how some revenues are higher than expected, but others are lower than expected. I mean, how do you try and forecast that?
So that's, again, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, and Lawrence can jump in. I mean, we sit down, when we start the budget process, we have a pretty good handle of applications that we may see based on pre-cons. But again, it's our best guess. Sometimes those applications may come in a given year. Sometimes they don't come in, or we expect more applications to come in than we anticipate. So it's really just our best guess based on our discussions with applicants who are thinking about coming in with an application. And we project that out with respect to the engineering fees. That's based on cost estimates of the engineering works for subdivision or site plan. And again, it's our engineering staff, and it's our best guess. So pretty close.
The reason why 52119, the PDS planning engineering fees subdivision is just because you've had more than anticipated this year.
In that
It turns out that's what's out of your time.
Yeah, just to supplement to that, the engineering cost, like Marco explains, is part of the engineering cost estimate. So in the beginning of the year, it's difficult to be more precise on how much engineering costs will be because it's based on the applicant who they hired and the detail and complexity of how to build the set infrastructure. So as the years move on, the applicants and engineers may request for a higher cost estimate to do the actual job, then we'll take a percentage of that. Whereas the application is kind of static, and it's always easier to anticipate on how many number of applications and how many units, but the cost of the work on the engineering costs could rise as the years goes on. And that's why the cost of materials that may have increased, and that's why it's hard to anticipate that particular item is much higher than the actual application because of just cost of materials maybe increasing that year.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, following along on that, so I noticed that, in the commentary in terms of salaries, it says, while the budget for 2025 includes a full staff complement, and yet the forecast for the overtime is significantly more than previous years. So I'm just wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, to Marco and team, how you reconcile if you have a full staff complement and yet overtime is anticipated to be significantly more than previous years. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chair, when it comes to overtime, the first 70 hours is actually reflected as lead time, so it's not actually paid. So the overtime, when it does actually kick in, kicks in after that point in time. $14,000 on almost $500 is quite low. It's a very small percentage, but it is something you can look at and refine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only overtime that we do pay, we are inspectors. We'll actually up there spend some more time. Again, that's paying any overtime above that 70 hours. It's the only time we're paying any sort of overtime staff.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just to quickly add to that. I noticed the 14,000 forecast does tie to building services, which is self-funded as well. So it's not impacting the levy side of things. Bill, maybe Bill is Bill there? Maybe Bill can speak to that over time.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The building budget is completely self funded through and any deficits or at or additions are through the building department reserve.
So for you, it's not a huge amount, but it is significantly more than 2022, 23, and 24. So I guess I'm assuming we used more inspectors this year than previous years.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, Bill, just with respect to that, the inspector overtime charge, I think it would have just been, now, you know, it would have been the same number of staff, they would have been busier with additional inspections and just putting that extra time during the inspections. And then we get to a certain point where they'll log in their hours of blue time, and beyond that, we've got to pay them off.
And that's for you. In terms of the FOI expenses, it's not a huge amount, it's not a big deal, but I was wondering, normally because there's it's a service fee recovery when someone asks for an FOI, especially with that one individual. So on the revenue side, it says that we collected 3,040, and in the 2025 column in the budget, expenses are 2,000. Shouldn't they be equal because we're charging, people on an hourly basis? Is there a surplus and that we're charging more than what it's written down as an expense? 62059 is the expense. And then on the next page, 52114 revenues.
Yeah, so we do get, through Mr. Mayor, we do get a lot of, just corporate, there are a lot of FOI requests that come in, and, clerks will then, or the FOI officer will send those out to various departments. So we do spend a lot of staff time, looking through files, et cetera, to see if we have any relevant information. We do track our time, and we pass that on, so that is billed to the applicant who files that request. I'm not sure why there's a difference there, but yeah, we really only recover our costs. So we put in our staff time based on how many hours the staff spend on those files.
I guess the FOI expenses might be about how much it costs to actually reproduce the actual materials that to be sent out, whereas the revenue is the amount of dollars we collect through the man hours that we charge back to the users requesting. So I think that's the difference. Is that the question?
Yes, so expenses that we're incurring by having to go to another vendor.
It could be like calling Iron Mountain for the archives. It actually has to spend actual money to bring the material set back to the town hall, or it could be reprinting certain items, etc., to reproduce the said requested items, versus the expenses actually what we charge the person who requested the amount.
So the difference, like $1,040, is going to be our hourly rate that we charge. Next, for you, Mr. Mayor, following page 56111. General table there, so official plan applications. I'm assuming when there's an official plan application like an OPA, amendment application, and zoning change applications. There are more zoning application changes than I would imagine in official plan applications. So I would assume that the revenues for the zoning would exceed the official plan. On 2022, it's the reverse. The official plan applications are revenue is greater. You see that same trend in 25, and then 23 and 24. It's the reverse, where you got zoning application revenues exceeding official plan application revenues. Because normally if you do an official plan application, you normally have to do zoning as well. Conversely, you can do zoning independently, without having to do an OP change. So hence, imagine getting more revenues from zoning. So what happened? I'm just wondering rationale for official plan application revenues being greater in 25 and 22 versus previous 2 years where it seems more normal.
For you, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah, our official plan applications, the fee for official plan applications are higher than zone. So, and you're correct, Councilor Kim. I mean, typically, if there's an OP, there's likely an associated zoning bylaw to go with it. But the application fee for OPs are higher than zoning bylaws. And typically, I mean, if you've got it budgeted or seeing about $150,000-$60,000 with OPs, that's typically 4 or 5 applications. The zoning fee is less than the official plan, just because it's a bigger policy change. So it's a bigger fee, a larger fee. Moving forward, though, we don't project that many OPAs, but I think in the past few years, 4 or 5 project. Sometimes it's less, sometimes you get 1 or 2. We're always correct. We're always going to see more as ZMEAs and official plan improvements.
Any other comments?
Anything else?
I think the fees double for official plan versus.
So move the recommendation. Those in favor? Opposed? Carries. New business? Eric? Motion adjourned. Eric Michael? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you.